for the last two chapters in problem set 3, I've combined chapters 24 and 25 because they are so short. So the synopsis will include both of them. So for this, chapter 24 is about the FDIC. So I mentioned in the last synopsis that at the FDIC, during the panic of 2008, people were complaining because the FDIC insurance was only $100,000 per account, per name per account. So if you had a single account, your money was insured up to 100,000. If it was a joint account, 200,000. That had been in place for decades and decades. So people were saying, that really isn't enough money. So during this panic of 2008, when we were in the Great Recession, the FDIC did increase the deposit limit on to 250,000 per person. So don't worry in this chapter about the adverse selection versus the moral hazard, because the terminology is a bit confusing. But basically the point of this chapter is that when the banks know that the FDIC is going to insure the money, the depositor money up to 250,000 per person, then it's kind of like they're too big to fail, right? It's the same issue. It's the same situation with these companies, knowing that the government will bail them out. So it's the moral hazard regarding the too big to fail strategy. It leads to risky behavior. So if the banks know that if they lose our money, the FDIC is going to step in and guarantee our money, then they can take all the risks that they want to. So they can make risky loans, they can engage in all of this risky behavior up to the limits of up to the limits of the law, because they know that they'll be bailed out, so to speak, that will be bailed out. And so the whole point of this chapter is saying that bank managers have an incentive now to take higher risks than they normally would have because of the FDIC insurance. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the main takeaway from chapter 24. Okay, now let me pull up chapter 25. Chapter 25 is a newer chapter in this book. It's in the latest edition, and it's talking about e-pay. So just think about, what are the pros and cons of e-pay? I mean, we all use debit cards now. I have undergraduate students who don't even know how to write a check, don't even have checks, which I think that's crazy. I mean, you should always have some checks, even though you probably rarely write checks. I rarely write checks these days, but it's always good to have checks. You just never know. Just like it's always good to have cash. Think about the hurricanes that we've had to go through. Some of you are too young to remember Hurricane Katrina. Of course, you remember Hurricane Ida. But when you have a situation like that, cash is always king. It's good to have cash. So the problem with the e-pay is, what if the power is out? I mean, I'm just thinking about that from a South Louisiana point of view, but think about some other pros and cons of e-pay. The pros are it's convenient, of course, but the cons are you open yourself possibly up for more fraud. It might be harder to keep track. For example, if you're paying, if you're paying digitally, by that I mean, if you're using a debit card versus cash, it can be hard to keep track of it. You might tend to spend more. And then, then moving on to the Google and the Apple Pay, just think about e-paying versus a traditional way to pay. And what are the pros and cons of that? Do you use e-pay? You can talk about that if in the homework assignment. I believe there's a question on this, but if there is, then think about, I can't remember off the top of my head, but think about those things. Also, at the time when this version of the book is a couple years old, so at the time that it came out, Apple Pay and Google Pay was just coming on board. And the point that they were making, there were several articles about this, about how Visa and MasterCard are in the dark ages as far as their technology to fight fraud. The con artists, they're really up on the latest technology, but Visa and MasterCard was really behind the curve. And it's dangerous for us as consumers. Well, since then, Visa and MasterCard has come out with the chip card. So I think the chip card has really helped to curb a lot of fraud. I know that they don't recommend using your credit card or your debit card at gas stations because of the skimming. Gas stations were notorious for that. But you'll notice now some of the gas stations have the chip card reader. So I think it's a lot safer. But anyway, so there was discussion, could Apple and Google actually put these companies out of business? Because at the time, Apple Pay claims, and I believe that it's true, it's much more secure to use Apple Pay than to just, hand over your credit card. Probably the same with Google Pay, although I haven't researched that very much. But anyway, the point I'm making is, yes, Apple Pay and Google Pay, they're a lot more technologically advanced and arguably safer, but I think that Visa and MasterCard has stepped up to the plate to make our credit cards that we use by them more secure by adding the chip. So the answer is probably not. I mean, you can discuss that, but they're probably not going to put Visa and MasterCard out of business. I don't know about you, but I downloaded the Apple Pay app. Of course, if you have Apple Pay on your phone, if you have an Apple phone, I went to the trouble to put my cards up on the phone. I had it on I had my cards linked to my Apple Watch for a while, but to be honest with you, I just kind of quit using it because it was just kind of a hassle. It's just easier to take out my credit card and use my credit card and my debit card. So let me know what you all do. Do you guys use this digital pay? It is convenient, but anyway, that's the gist of this chapter. Not really as an important chapter, as important as a lot of the prior chapters, but certainly something to think about. Okay, so this sums up our chapter 3, or homework problem 3, or problems at 3. Problems at 4 is really short. I'll have those videos posted in a few days. Take care.